Without a doubt, one of the biggest hurdles in Edmonton is defenseman Darnell Nurse, a guy whose albatross of a contract, which sees him making $9.25 million a year till the end of 2030, and a player who just isn't really that good. Yes, it's true, Darnell Nurse has had his highlights in the past. When he is at his best, he is a minutes-eating, 30-plus minute-a-night guy, especially when you go to double overtime. And just a player who is an absolute workhorse. He's big, he's lanky, he can move. If he's playing his best, he plays with pace and he's actually pretty effective, but unfortunately, the turnovers, they haven't been good these past few months. And the overall body of work that Darnell Nurse has provided offensively has started to decline, too. Once was a 40-point guy throughout multiple seasons with the Oilers, he's now become a 30, heck, even 20-point guy with this team. In the playoffs, he has made his bread and butter known with all of the minutes that he plays. He's getting up to 27 minutes in overtime, he's getting up to 26 minutes in regulation, yada yada. Go over to 2024. I'd say that this is probably a sample where we saw some of the best Darnell Nurse defending, and even then he wasn't getting as many minutes as he had had once upon a time. I think that 2020 series saw him get a boatload of minutes against Dallas. There's that 30-minute game for Edmonton back then. But going throughout the years, here it is. This is what I was talking about. 2021, Darnell Nurse plays 60 minutes in a 4-3 overtime loss to Winnipeg, which ended up getting them swept in that first round series. Yeah, he's capable of playing a lot when you give him the stage. But Darnell Nurse, unfortunately, is one of these guys that's just too gosh darn expensive for the quality of play he provides. And with the defensive inefficiencies, you could understand why the Oilers would want to move on from this guy. But what if I told you the Edmonton Oilers actually did try trading away Darnell Nurse? At least, that's what's reported by David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period. Take a look at this article posted by Preston Hodgkinson on dailyhive.com. The Oilers attempted a Darnell Nurse trade at the deadline with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Oh boy. Let's dive into this article. It'll be linked in the description below. The Oilers reportedly tried to swing a blockbuster trade with the Maple Leafs at the 2026 trade deadline. It was a relatively quiet deadline for the Oilers, as they swung a pair of deals with the Blackhawks to acquire Murphy, Dickinson, and Colton Dach, but a new report says that GM Stan Bowman was trying to offload a part of the team's core, and just couldn't get the trade over the finish line. NHL insider David Pagnotta revealed a bombshell revelation on Tuesday's edition of the Oilers Nation Everyday Show, that the Oilers attempted to trade Nurse to the Maple Leafs at the deadline. He didn't say the exact return Edmonton was looking for, but it was clearly Nick Waugh, who ended up getting traded to the Colorado Avalanche. Nurse's name was out there the week of the deadline, Pagnotta said. They offered him up to one team. That team said no. That team now has a new general manager. One of the other pieces a part of that deal that Edmonton was looking at, from what I was told, he's now on Colorado. So, David Pagnotta's definitely not hiding it. He's just not directly saying that it's the Maple Leafs. New GM and the guy that the Oilers wanted inevitably got sent over to Colorado. Edmonton spoke to Toronto ahead of the deadline. They tried to make it happen. Darnell Nurse's name was circulating. They spoke to the Leafs. That didn't happen. And we'll kind of see where that goes. Pagnotta also alluded to the fact that Toronto's new GM John Chayka is unlikely to want to revisit those trade conversations for Nurse this summer. That would take at least one of the places Nurse could potentially wave to an unlikely destination. So, that's pretty cryptic, isn't it? Darnell Nurse almost got traded over to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And here's the funny part about all that. If the Maple Leafs properly made this move, let's say Edmonton gets Nick Waugh, Toronto gets Darnell Nurse, and maybe a sweetener of some sorts, because, the Oilers getting rid of Darnell was actually a pretty big addition by subtraction type of thing. Nick Waugh only would have helped them that much more. Would it not have signaled a bigger focus on the future in Toronto had Darnell Nurse got sent over there. I understand that there's a certain kind of mold of guys that Toronto seems to want on their decor. I mean, you think about Brandon Carlo, you think about the Chris Taneds of the world. There's a certain kind of guy that the Toronto Maple Leafs have tried to acquire over the past few years. And oddly enough, I do think Darnell Nurse fits into that mold. But you could also look at it in some sort of a Morgan Rielly-esque replacement type of lens, where the Toronto Maple Leafs could also see Rielly's future with the team as an inevitable departure, which would leave Darnell Nurse a top-tier spot in the lineup to go out there and try to do his thing to replace those minutes. Mo is unfortunately not the player that he once was, but his contract also goes on till 2030, as does Darnell's. Rielly, though, is making a few $1 million less than the Oilers defenseman. Mo is at 7.5, Darnell's at 9.25. So if the Toronto Maple Leafs were more intent on changing the direction on the fly, whilst keeping the team competitive, getting Rielly out, getting Darnell in, whilst trading away Nick Waugh would have been a pretty meaningful change. It also is interesting how now it's like, yeah, well, David Pagnotta is saying that he doesn't think the Maple Leafs are going to revisit those talks. It seems like the Darnell Nurse trade has been shipped off and already off to Amsterdam or some point. This is not a possibility anymore. And I understand the two at the same time, right? Like, I get that this article and the conversation was just a few days ago, but anything can change with the Toronto Maple Leafs nowadays, especially now that they have that first overall pick. Everything is changed. Austin Matthews and his future could potentially change itself up. We've been talking this entire past few months about Austin Matthews' future. It's really going to depend on him, isn't it? William Nylander, you're here to stay. John Tavares, he can't really afford to go anywhere else. It's Austin Matthews that acts as the biggest cog in the machine. And it is quite interesting to me how, in the midst of this Austin Matthews, Toronto losing scenario where they ended up missing the playoffs and finding themselves in the draft lottery conversation, I do find it quite hilarious that Brad Treliving was in the market for Darnell Nurse. I mean, it's John Chayka at the helm now, so obviously he's not going to revisit those conversations, but the fact that it got to a point where David Pagnotta feels the comfort of reporting it on an episode of Oilers Nation every day a few weeks down the line, it does get me interested as to what could have gone down. So if you're an Oilers fan, you're a Maple Leafs fan, how do you feel about this report that the Oilers tried trading Darnell Nurse to the Maple Leafs for Nick Waugh, only for the deal to not cross the finish line until the very end? Nurse stayed with Edmonton, Nick Waugh got traded to Colorado, the Maple Leafs got the first overall pick, and Darnell is still in Edmonton. Thoughts in the comments section, how this would have changed everything. What are your opinions on the fact that the trade didn't go through? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.